Mind the gap. Women earn half as much as men, they work longer hours and have a tiny chance of getting senior jobs. That's the reality of the gender pay divide. No wonder analysts say it'll take 170 years to sort out. I'm Martin Stamford. This is Inside. Welcome to Inside. Wherever you are in the world, whatever you're doing, if you're a woman, it's likely you are earning less than the men where you work. Despite decades of campaigns, the gender pay gap is actually growing. From discrimination and segregation to stereotypes and balancing family life. The reasons behind it are complex, but the consequence is simple. Women struggle to earn as much as men, and analysts say it'll take nearly 200 years to close the gap. Insight's Emma Birchley reports.
These days, there isn't a job out there that a woman can't do. But in the 21st century, men are still earning more. In fact, at the rate things are going, it's expected to be 170 years before the gender pay gap is finally closed across the globe.
We still have very stereotypical understanding of where women should be in a society and where men should be in a society, regardless of how far we've come in the social development.
And those stereotypes affect the kind of jobs women have, how far they climb the career ladder, and ultimately how much they are paid.
Women are very often found to be in a majority of entry-level and junior roles, but a minority of director roles, and that's something that really creates this huge gap that we see.
The question is how to change deeply entrenched attitudes. Jana Javonik, an expert in equality and diversity at the University of East London, believes the answer lies with governments.
Governmental initiative is basically the foundation of every social change, so it needs to start with the government. The government needs to step in, and then everything else is left to the employers or other social actors to actually enhance this. But why the governmental initiative is so important is exactly because it allows a uniform approach across the social strata.
Leading the way is Iceland. In a world first, the country's parliament recently announced it was considering a bill requiring companies to prove they offer equal pay. And the UK has just made moves to tackle the problem, forcing companies with more than 250 employees to reveal their gender pay gap. Perhaps unsurprisingly, recent research revealed that Iceland tops the ranks when it comes to wage equality, having closed 87% of its pay gap. And the next 3 spots are taken by other Nordic countries. The UK comes in at 20th place, with the US in 45th position and Turkey down at 130 on the list. At the very bottom of the 144 countries included in the research is Yemen, having closed only 52% of its pay gap. In most cases, it's not that women are being paid less than men for doing the same job. In the UK, that's been illegal since 1970. But they're often doing jobs in less well-paid sectors, and if they take a break to have children, it can then prove tricky to progress. Research by the Chartered Management Institute revealed that male managers in the UK are 40% more likely than females to be promoted into higher roles. The head of research at the CMI is hopeful changes to the law will help.
Transparency for any organisation is going to really focus management minds on the challenge they've got. It's going to get customers and potential employees looking at the data and saying, OK, if there is a gap, why is that? So management is going to be driven to take a look at the underlying causes and what they and their business can do to close it.
The current gender pay gap in the UK means women are, in effect, working for free from the second week in November until the end of the year.
When it comes to full-time work, females in the UK still earn around 10% less than men, with the disparity being significantly higher in some areas. In fact, women only buck the trend in a handful of places, including here in Hackney in East London.
But even here, female doctors were recently shown to earn £8,000 less than their male counterparts. And closing the gap is a battle women in many careers are facing every day.
I'm Gemma Gardner and I'm a special educational needs specialist for looked after children. In terms of gender and equality and discrimination, we're quite far behind where I think we should be. I mean, if you look at what Iceland have done recently, that's amazing, and we should definitely be there too. Yeah, I think it's quite embarrassing.
I'm Sarai Richards and I'm a fine dining chef. If it's not equal, I feel that I will be then working 10 times harder to make what my opposite sex makes in the same job. But I do feel that us women are very strong and we're very fully capable, and I feel that we should take that money and be able to earn that money with the same respect.
The impact of the gender pay gap goes way beyond the size of women's wage packets. Less money now means less to save or invest, and in turn, less security in later life. It seems only a fundamental shift in attitudes, backed up by legislation, is likely to change that. Emma Birchley reporting for Insight.
Well, to discuss that further, I'm joined by Belinda Phipps, who's the chair of the Fawcett Society. That's the UK's leading charity campaigning for gender equality and women's rights. Belinda, it used to be the case, didn't it, that a man doing a job and the woman doing the same job would have quite a different amount of pay for that identical task. That is not the case so much these days,
well,
correct?
in the UK, the Equal Pay Act was brought in more than 40 years ago, which should have put an end to that. It hasn't absolutely put an end to that, because the odd case does come up, but it's not the main cause of the difference in pay between men and women.
As we look around the world, though, that is still a factor, isn't it?
It is.
That in some countries, in some industries, in some circumstances, women get significantly less money for doing to all intents and purposes, an identical task.
Job. Where there isn't any equal pay legislation or any enforcement of equal pay legislation, that is the primary cause. And it seems the most unfairest when you're doing exactly the same job. It seems the most unfairest. So more than 40 years ago, the UK tackled it, but it hasn't quite completed making sure it never happens.
Why do you think that is? Why are there still gaps?
It's quite hard if you're female and employed to actually know what your male counterparts are paid. The culture in the UK is very much one of secrecy around what you're paid, so it's not easily and publicly available. So it's quite hard to bring those cases, though they are brought from time to time and have been won on various occasions. So I think employers are much more aware now just how in the UK how badly that's regarded if you're an employer to be found to be doing that sort of thing.
So public sentiment has been won over. That argument, if you like, has been had, and now most employees would agree that you should get a fair whack, irrespective of what sex you happen to be.
Absolutely. There are still interesting discussions in the world of sport about whether men and women sports people should get the same prize money, but that's the tail end of a debate that's largely over. If you're doing the same job, you should be paid the same, irrespective of the gender you are.
Well, I think that takes us down an avenue, doesn't it, about the sort of commercial appeal and stuff like that. Can't the tennis authorities, for instance, a subject we've discussed on this programme before, argue that male tennis players have a greater commercial appeal, therefore they can attract a greater number of spectators, therefore they can afford to pay them more money?
And that's the chicken and egg argument. So if you don't publicise women's sport, then you are going to get more spectators for men's sport, and so it goes on. So it's not as simple as that. And that's an argument made by somebody that would rather not see equality happening.
What about if we move on from that factor to the opportunities for work? Are they as fair and a flat playing field as they should be?
No, they're not. There are numerous studies that show that women are less likely to be promoted than men. You've only got to look across the top of our companies in the most senior positions. The more senior the position, the less likely you are to find a woman in it. And it is bizarre sometimes, the reasons that are given for not promoting women. So if you have say a cohort of 100 staff all doing roughly similar jobs and you've got 10 posts to promote them in, more often than not you'll find men promoted into those. And when you talk to the managers about why they did it, it may be they're making presumptions on behalf of the woman. Oh, well, she's recently had a baby, I didn't think she'd want the extra responsibility. Oh, well, he's the earner in the household. All sorts of reasons that are not based on any kind of facts. And some of the more forward-thinking companies are now starting to say to their managers, look, if you're going to be promoting 10 people out of a cohort of 100, and that 100 is 50% male and 50% female, we'd expect to see 50-50 promoted, and you would need to come to us and justify it if you did something different.
Is there a factor that the people doing the promotion, making the decisions as who to promote and not, are predominantly men?
There is that as well, and whether you're male or female, we're all biased in one way or another. You've got to remember that in pretty much every country in the world, the way you're brought up is affected by the gender you are or you're perceived to be. So in most of the world, because we mostly live in a patriarchy, mostly women are brought up to be educated, to be quiet, to be meek, to be reticent, to be carers, to do the domestic work, and men are brought up to be bold, to be courageous, to be pushy, to be expected to take the lead. And if that sort of message is given to you from the very moment you're born, it has an impact on your psyche and whether you're likely to ask to be promoted, and it has an impact on the psyche of those that might be offering you the job. People make presumptions about what you can or can't do, and yet the research would suggest that talents and skills are pretty equally distributed between men and women, and if we didn't separate the genders and bring them up with different ideas, you'd actually have a very equal set of skills.
But take us back to the promotion of the 10 slots are available, and you expected 5 women, 5 men to get them. Does there not have to be a meritocracy involved as well? I mean, wouldn't it be counterproductive if one of the women who were promoted were not actually very good at their job?
Well, that's the argument about quotas, and what we're not suggesting is quotas here. We're just suggesting companies ask the question.
Yeah.
In the law of averages would suggest that with a 50-50 cohort, you'd get 50-50 in the position. It might be 6-4 or whatever, but they need
fair opportunities for training and this kind of thing, and skills
to justify why they haven't, why it's not equal. So the larger number of people in the cohort, the more likely you are to end up with the promoted group representing exactly the other group. There's no shortage of talent among women, and the argument that's sometimes put together on quotas is that you'll promote or put somebody in position who's less able just because they're female. Well, actually, if you look around, there are so many able women who are working well under their ability level that you're spoilt for choice.
We'll continue the discussion in just a moment. You're watching Insight. Coming up after the break, more on the discussion about the gender pay gap.